Well, may I say thank you very much for the great privilege of being with you for this very important conference. I would like to show a PowerPoint presentation because pictures speak louder than words, and they stay as a basis for prayer long after words disappear. And I'm working with my colleague, Beth Stevens, who I hope has my PowerPoint and is about to put that on, if the logistics will allow that. Beth, thank you, Beth. Lovely. And so, Ken, may I just ask me, can you see the PowerPoint? Can you hear me and see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Well, the subject, as you know, is freedom of religion talked about sufficiently. Next, please, Beth. And we need to go back to the basic fundamental principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In Article 18, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief and freedom, either alone or in community, with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. And his also includes hers, of course. But this is the fundamental principle on which we need to make our case for the freedom of religion and to challenge persecution where people are persecuted for their faith. Next slide, please. And just an introduction to the principles of advocacy and key advocacy arenas. Advocacy must be based on documentation and evidence, because these provide legitimacy, credibility, and authority. Next slide, please, Beth. They minimize harm, and we need to minimize harm and maximize effectiveness of advocacy. And the fundamental principle is to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, to be a voice for the voiceless. Just while I'm on this, may I say, by way of introducing myself, that when I was introduced to the House of Lords, I wasn't born a baroness, I was appointed, but I tried to use my role there, speaking in the British Parliament, to be a voice of people whose voices are not heard. And I established a charity, a Humanitarian Aid Relief Trust, to be a voice for people whose voices aren't heard and to provide effective advocacy. And we visit those suffering persecution to be able to obtain first-hand evidence and to give personal witness accounts of their situation, including their faith, dignity, courage, and miracles of grace. We do visit our partners on the front lines of faith and freedom, and we always return just humbled and inspired by, as I just mentioned, their inspirational faith, dignity, courage, and miracles of grace. Next slide, please. And the example this morning, we only have time for two examples, will be Nigeria and Armenia. Next slide, please. Nigeria, unfolding genocide. In recent years, Islamist terrorists, such as Boko Haram and Islamist Fulani militia, not all Fulani are Islamist, but the Islamists are the terrorist ones with the terrorist initiatives and activities, and they have massacred thousands of civilians and displaced millions. Islamist terrorist attacks continue in northern and central states, with almost daily reports of killings, rape, abductions, mass forced displacement, and land grabs. The human rights organization Inter Society reports that 4,400 Christians were killed within just a 9-month period in 2021, in addition to the tens of thousands killed since 2009. I may say that in the United Kingdom, we hardly get this reported in our media at all. It is a hidden series of terrorist attacks which is not reported. Next slide, please. Thousands of students have been abducted from school. You may have heard of Leah Sharibu. She is one. She is a saint. She was kept a prisoner because she refused to convert to Islam. But there are many, many like her. Also, hundreds of churches have been destroyed and entire communities overrun by jihadists. And many Muslims who are not jihadists have also been killed. Next slide, please. And just come and see just some of the places we've visited. I could show you so many more, but just some examples. This is the remains of the University Church in Jos, in Plateau State, the destruction of churches is part of the jihadist policies. Next slide, please. And this is another church down in Kaduna. And I'm afraid I could show you so many pictures of churches just destroyed in the Islamist attacks on villages and townships. Next slide, please. Evidence from survivors of attacks. They're not just killings, there are terrorist activities which really do cause terror. And we've witnessed so many examples of witness statements of the suffering inflicted by militants on Christian victims. As I say, not all victims are Christians, some Muslims have also been killed, but the vast majority of those who've been subjected to massacres are Christians, and the Islamist militants are reported to shout traditional Islamist commitments to killing of Christians when they undertake attacks. We're told that as they come with their attacks, they'll shout Allah Akbar, and the killings proceed. Next slide, please. This is talking to people who've survived the attacks, getting the first-hand evidence of what has happened. Next slide, please. And just one or two examples. Again, I'm afraid I could multiply these enormously. But one example, from Trundung in Kura, we heard gunshots. 18 people were killed and their bodies were set alight. They burned homes. An old man who couldn't run was killed. And just I've been in Nigeria twice this year already. And just one example of that, a more recent one, we visited a little village or township that had been attacked by the Islamists. And they found an elderly lady and they said, "Oh, Grandma, you look cold. We'll warm you up." And they just threw her into a burning building. Atrocities are, I'm afraid, a very regular occurrence along with the attacks. Another quotation, they came around 7 p.m. and left just before midnight. More than 200 of them in black cloth, well armed. Yesterday we lost another 19 of our people. This is the church warden at the Timothy Church in Jos, the capital city of Plateau State. So it's not all in the rural areas. Next slide, please. And this is what was left of that church in Jos after the attack. Next slide, please. And this is a poignant one. They shot Sarah's husband and children, so she begged them to kill her too. But they refused, saying they wanted her to cry and bear the pain. She came to church this week. Next slide, please. Faith and challenge. One of our partners in Nigeria is the Anglican Archbishop in Plateau State, Archbishop Ben Kwashi, and his statement, I think, is perhaps a challenge to us all. He said to us, if we have a faith worth living for, it is a faith worth dying for. Don't you, that's us, compromise the faith we are living and dying for. Next slide, please. And there is Archbishop Ben Kwashi and his lovely wife, Gloria. She had a horrendous time being attacked by Islamists, and I won't go into the details, but she survived. And they still smile, the amazing, dynamic smiles of faith. Next slide, please. But another challenge that Archbishop Ben gave us, if you don't resist now, your grandchildren are going to have to fight the battles you did not have the courage to fight. And there perhaps is a challenge for all of us in this conference. Next slide, please. The UK's government response. Despite the presentation of numerous reports, including one by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Freedom of Religion and Belief, entitled Nigeria Unfolding Genocide, the UK government has failed to respond to pressure from UK parliamentarians to call the government of Nigeria to account. 4, failing to bring perpetrators of violence to justice. Virtually no one who's carried out the killings has been brought to justice. From protecting civilians from massacres and land loss, or providing recompense to victims of attacks, with should be the return of stolen land and livestock, restoration of destroyed buildings. And the problem continues. We're getting the emails in, the latest reports, almost daily. Next slide, please. We're going to move very briefly on to Armenia, the first nation to become Christian in 301. Next slide, please. History of Armenia's Christianity, as I said, it was the first nation to become Christian, and Gregory wished to bring Christianity to Armenia, but the king was not receptive and ordered Gregory to be thrown into a deep dungeon, which is still present. The picture we've just seen of the original building, the circular part of the ancient building, was the dungeon into which he was thrown, and we've been down in that dungeon many times. It still stands, to pray for the persecuted. And Gregory survived 13 long years in that terrible dungeon, surviving on food passed through a small hole in the wall. Then the king became dangerously ill. He was healed by Gregory, and the king became a Christian and declared Armenia a Christian nation in 301. Next slide, please. But Armenia suffered so much. The first genocide, major genocide of the last century, 1.5 million Armenians were murdered by Turkey. And then Nagorno-Karabakh is an Armenian enclave located by Stalin in Azerbaijan with his policy of cutting people off from their lands and putting them into hostile environments, divide and rule. And the Armenians who lived there resisted attempted ethnic cleansing by Azerbaijan in a bitter war from 1990 to 1994. Next slide, please. That's a little land on Nagorno-Karabakh, in case we weren't familiar with the geography of it. Next slide, please. And I was there many, many times during that war. I used to count 400 Grad missiles a day pounding in on the little capital city, Stepanakert. You might say, how do you count 400? Well, Grad, as many people know, is the Russian for hail. And Grad, they fired 40 shots of 10 Grad missiles in every one, so 400 a day came pounding in. Next slide, please. And this is a poignant picture. These two men have come in from the front line, and the pile of rubble behind, I'm afraid, was the home of the young man in blue jeans, and under the rubble are his pregnant wife and two little girls. So we were there many times and got a lot of evidence of the persecution of the Armenian Christians. Next slide, please. A renewed military aggression. A ceasefire was agreed in 1994, but in the autumn of 2020, Azerbaijan unleashed a new war on Karabakh, supported by Turkey, with massive military resources, including illegal use of cluster bombs and targeting civilians with drones. Next slide, please. This is the maternity hospital. It's a war crime deliberately to bomb and attack civilian and non-military buildings, and a maternity hospital. You can hardly be more non-military than that. That got a direct hit. Next slide, please. And I've taken all these photos so I can vouch for their authenticity. And this was the electric power station that was deliberately targeted. And just with me, the head of a wonderful rehabilitation center it's our privilege to support, which is doing a huge amount of work for victims of the war. And my colleague, Reverend David Thomas, who was a chaplain in the Royal Navy for 20 years, now serves as our logistics officer. Next slide, please. And there have been harrowing cases where Azeri soldiers have captured Armenians, taken their phones, and taken videos of torturing and executing the prisoner, sending the photos back to the family. Been to Armenia twice this year, and one of the ladies I met there that time, she said she'd lost her husband. She did not dare to look at her phone in case she saw pictures of terrible things they'd done to her husband. Next slide, please. Azerbaijan continues to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity with impunity, including continuation of detention of Armenian prisoners in violation of the ceasefire agreement, killing civilians, and destruction of sacred sites. Next slide, please. And this is a picture I took this week outside the British Parliament, the slaughter of Armenians now inside Armenia itself. And there's a 36-year-old young mother, 3 children, and she was captured by Azeri soldiers in September. They raped and mutilated me alive. They gouged my eyes out. They put stones in my eye sockets. They urinated my naked body. They filmed me, sent my video to the world. And there are hundreds of Armenians tortured like me. And this is a demonstration in London. Next slide, please. And this is a deliberate attack on a sacred building, the cathedral in Shushi in Nagorno-Karabakh. That again is a war crime to attack religious sites. Next slide, please. Reasons for failure to call to account. On one occasion, I was present during one of the wars inflicted by Azerbaijan. I took photos of children shredded by cluster bombs. Use of cluster bombs is illegal. When I was the senior person in the UK government to make representations for Azerbaijan to stop using cluster bombs, the reply, no country has an interest in other countries, only interests. We have oil interests in Azerbaijan. Good morning. Next slide, please. And I'm going to finish with a quotation from Cardinal Bo of Burma, because I think he sums up, as you, I'm sure, are aware, the people of Burma. We call it Burma, not Myanmar, because our partners there prefer the word Burma. But he really sums up, I think, everything that brings us together. Freedom of thought, conscience, religion, or belief, as detailed in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is perhaps the most precious and most basic freedom of all. Without the freedom to choose, practice, share, and change your beliefs, there is no freedom. We call on everyone who has a position of influence in politics, religion, the media, education, civil society to use their voice to speak out against religious hatred and intolerance. And that is what brings us together. And it's a great privilege to share this pain and this passion with you today. So thank you. End. I think I will show the rest of the slide, and we're running on out of time. So there's just a final slide, where can we advocate? But I think, Beth, will probably draw a line, because I think we've used our time up. Thank you very much, everybody.